This is just a crazy idea that I got from looking inside the MGC5 centerpiece. So basically, if you were to look at really back the centerpiece, I'm not too sure how well the camera can pick this, but you can see a washer at the bottom, and the centerpiece is basically just a big rectangular hole, like at least the top part of the centerpiece that houses the screw. It's just a gigantic rectangular hole inside where all you have is a spring, a screw, and a washer, and one pillar inside, which I'll show you the pillar real quick here. So I actually didn't know that this pillar exists until I took out some of the pieces to measure them. But then, like, okay, this is my best reconstruction of the part of the whole centerpiece that can carry the screw, and I try to make it as to scale as possible. So it's really like 10 millimeters across, and like this thing, I think is 4 millimeters tall, I think, if I remember correctly. But like this is basically what the MGC5 centerpiece looks like. It's like just the screw housing part of the centerpiece. It's just one big rectangular hole with at most only the small pillar to occupy a little bit of space. And what the pillar actually does is it wraps around the screw so that like the centerpiece cannot wobble left and right. It can only move up and down, which is the proper function. The up and down movement of the centerpiece is supposed to allow for corner cutting, but you don't want it to like shake left and right that will make your cube a bit too unstable. So if you were to compare the structure of the MGC5 to some other cubes, I know the Aolong WR has another very unique structure that has a video on its own, but if you want to compare with the cyoubx5, it looks something like that. So you can tell that the cyoubx5 centerpiece has more structures inside. Like there's one extra ring around the screw, so there's really not much you can do with the cyoubx5 centerpiece. But with the MGC5 centerpiece, this is what I decided to do. So if you have seen a Aolong GTS 3 before, you probably can recognize what this thing really is. So yes, I did design a spring compression system which I believe is actually capable of fitting into the MGC 5x5. So there are two parts here. Of course, the most outstanding thing is that razor like sawtooth like structure. So I'm going to talk about that first. So you can tell that this is the weakest compression, and then it goes up a bit higher, and then it goes up a bit higher. This is the third level, and after the third level it snaps back to 1 again. I would stack these two pieces next to each other, they will actually go to the weakest compression. But now you look at this really tall part here. Like this is the longest one from the top. It's supposed to complement the shortest one on the bottom. But let's say if I were to push this a little bit further, now it's sitting on the second shortest one. Then it means that this one is running on top of empty space. Like like the shortest, the tallest one from the top here is now riding on top of empty space. The second one is now riding on top of the third one, and this whole entire top piece will be elevated by 1 level. And if you were to crank it up one more time, it will be elevated by 2 levels right here. And then if you crank it up one more time, it will just snap back to level 1. So we've got level 1, 2, and 3. Here I'm trying to keep it simple, and it's a 5x5, so of course the centerpiece is much smaller. I don't think there's that much room to have 9 spring compression levels in the 5x5 center, but I think having 3 is good enough. And what I was imagining is if you can make 3 that corresponds to level 0, okay, I mean I like to call them 0, 4, and 8, but you can also call them 1, 5, and 9. Right? Correspond to level 1, 5, and 9 of the GTS 3 compression. I think that would be really nice. You can have 3. You can change the feel quite drastically in just one click. Notice the bottom piece is sitting on top of a square base, and the reason behind that is because I'm just going to visualize only the bottom piece and this one. It's supposed to fit nicely and exactly. Of course, I floral molded it more than the actual center. Like I'm not exactly too sure about how floral molded the centerpiece of the MGC5 is, so I decided to play it safe and floral mold it like by a larger level. But the edges actually sit like exactly, like the square base actually sits exactly with the pieces around it. And this means that if you were to just 3D print this bottom piece altogether, it can actually sit inside the centerpiece, and like this square base would prevent it from turning around. So it will just be locked in this one position. Then the top piece here is freely maneuverable. And of course, like what I envision for this thing is this entire base is the same size and same dimension as the washers provided in the set. And then like the width of this thing is enough to fit the screw inside, but the spring itself will sit on this. So when you crank this thing up higher, this base here will push the spring upwards. and like the middle pillar in the of the MGC5, it doesn't disrupt the positioning. So like this pillar is the same size as the hole, so that like even if this thing is actually going to sit at the bottom, and it's going to sit around this pillar, and it's not going to occupy the same space as this pillar, so there's really no clash. But what I do envision is that like for YJ, just to redesign the bottom piece so that like there's no need to make this square base and this extra separate part, like this piece and that corner, like this and the centerpiece should have been one piece itself, and then this thing, which is the GTS 3 piece, just sits on top. That I think that would be ideal. And of course this one is just the spring compression tool, so it has that two teeth here, and that will correspond to that two holes here, so you can put it in. That's how I envision this thing working. If I were to really 3D print, like, I mean, of course I will need the tool, and of course I need the two halves of the compression system that I designed. But let's say if I were to 3D print this thing, then you can see how the pieces fit together. Two fits with this thing, and then this thing will sit on top of that, and when I crank it up, the bottom one won't move because it will lock to the centerpiece, and then only the top one will move. And actually the screw is a lot taller. You can actually rise higher, but I actually gave some room for this piece to wrap around the screw, and such that like you can totally cover up the screw and touch this piece, and when you turn this, it will move this piece without affecting the screw inside, basically. And the reason why I don't want this entire piece to be so high up is because of how the MGC centerpiece is designed again. Like the MGC centerpiece, it's not just as in the cap has a lot of space here, so I don't want my compression tool to be so tall that it will interfere with the cap. So yeah, that's why I purposely designed it to be short, like the compression piece in the compression system is supposed to be short, or the tool which is on top is going to be long enough, because when you insert the tool in, obviously you don't have a center cap, so you can occupy that, you can interfere with the center cap space, it doesn't matter, because it's just going to fit in, cover over the screw, go deep enough to touch that inner piece there, and then you can twist it up. And that's how I envision the MGC5 spring compression system. So if you're a YJ person watching this is just my suggestion to redesign the centerpiece of the MGC5. If you are the YJ company, you probably have access to the MGC Elite magnet rods. Just make a shorter version and cram it into this edge here. So you can just twist, change the magnet setting on both sides, and then you have a magnetic adjustable magnet, spring compressible 5x5.